My own mother won't even know it's gone. That was my son's voice. Calm, certain, as if he wasn't talking about me at all. The house alone is worth over $600, he continued. If we move now, we can split everything before she even notices. My daughter answered without hesitation. We just need her signature. She won't question it if we say it's for insurance. They were standing 10 feet away from me, in my living room, discussing my life like it had already been reduced to numbers on a page. A sheet of paper slid across the table with a dry, quiet sound. I heard the soft click of a pen. Someone shifted their weight, and the floorboard near the window gave its familiar, subtle creak. I didn't move. I kept my breathing steady, slow enough to match sleep. My eyes stayed closed, but I could feel the warm pressure of the lamp through my eyelids. Everything in the room was exactly as it had been an hour earlier. Except now I understood what I was lying inside. The pen clicked once, then again. Slow, certain. She's been forgetting things, Michael said, his voice measured, almost clinical. We can use that. Angela exhaled softly, not surprised, not conflicted, just thinking ahead. Then we don't wait. I wasn't confused. Just aware in a way I hadn't been before. A pause followed, not doubt, not hesitation. Just the quiet rhythm of two people who had already agreed on something long before tonight. They thought I was asleep. They thought I couldn't hear them. They thought I was already out of the way. The edge of the paper scraped softly against the table. I knew that sound. I had heard it for years. My fingers rested lightly against the blanket, but I could feel something tightening underneath the stillness. Not panic, not yet. Something more controlled. Something that knew reacting too soon would cost me more than silence ever could. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a moment taken out of context. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they were comfortable doing it. That was the part that settled deeper than anything else. Not the plan. Not even the words. The ease. I shifted my hand slowly toward the side table, careful not to disturb the rhythm of my breathing. My fingertips brushed against my phone. I picked it up without lifting my head, without opening my eyes. For a brief second, I hesitated. Not because I wasn't sure, but because a part of me already knew this wasn't the first time they had spoken like this. Then I pressed record. They kept going. About timing. About how to explain things so I wouldn't feel overwhelmed, about which papers to put in front of me first, and how to keep everything moving before I had time to think too much. Morning is better, Michael said. She's clearer then. Angela gave a small hum of agreement. And she trusts you. Trust. The word moved through the room so naturally it almost sounded deserved. The floorboard near the window creaked again when someone shifted. The same spot. It always did that. They weren't whispering because they were afraid of being caught. They were whispering because they believed there was nothing left to protect. I let the recording run. I didn't interrupt. I didn't open my eyes. Because if I did, they would stop. And I needed to know how far this had already gone. Another page turned. A chair shifted a fraction of an inch. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and in that space, something inside me settled into place, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a kind of quiet certainty. This hadn't started tonight. Tonight was just the first time I had allowed myself to hear it clearly. There are things you expect from strangers. There are things you prepare yourself for in the world outside your door. But this careful, deliberate way of rearranging someone's life while they're still living inside it comes from people who know where everything is kept. People who understand exactly how much you trust them. My name is Louise Bennett. I'm 79 years old, and until that night I believed the people I raised would never look at me this way. If you're listening to this somewhere far from home, tell me where you are. And tell me honestly, have you ever felt someone close to you slowly treating you like you were already gone? They moved around the room for a few more minutes. I could hear the quiet efficiency in the way they gathered their things, the soft rhythm of footsteps crossing the floor I had walked for decades. Tomorrow, Michael said, we'll come back and go through it with her. Angela's voice softened just slightly. Keep it simple. She won't push back if it sounds routine. Routine. That word stayed with me longer than the rest. I heard the front door open. A brief shift in the air moved through the room before the door closed again. Their footsteps faded, and then there was nothing. I opened my eyes slowly, staring at the ceiling. The light hadn't changed, but it felt distant now, like I was looking at it from somewhere slightly removed. My phone was still in my hand. The recording was still running. For a moment, I watched the small red line moving across the screen, marking time I could no longer pretend I didn't understand. I thought about sitting up, about calling them back, about asking them to repeat everything they had just said this time while looking at me, but I didn't. Instead, I let my hand fall gently back against the blanket, because whatever they had planned, it had already gone further than I was supposed to see, and I wasn't going to waste the one advantage I had left. I didn't sleep, not in any way that felt like rest. The night passed in fragments, brief stretches of stillness, broken by the same words returning clearer each time. At some point, the darkness thinned. When I opened my eyes again, morning had already settled into the room. For a moment, I didn't move. The house looked exactly the same pale light slipping through the curtains, the same table in the living room, the same chair angled slightly toward it, but something in the air felt different. Not louder, not heavier, just sharper. I listened. Not for them. They weren't there. Just for the house itself. The refrigerator hummed softly in the kitchen. The wall clock ticked with quiet precision. A car passed somewhere outside its sound, fading almost as soon as it appeared. Ordinary sounds, but now they seemed too defined, like everything had edges, where before it had blended together. I sat up slowly, my body moving with quiet control. My attention lingered a moment behind, still tracing the shape of the night before. My eyes drifted toward the living room. The table. From where I stood, I could see the faint outline of where the papers had been stacked. A corner slightly misaligned. A pen left just off its usual place. Small things, easy to overlook. Except now they weren't. They had been careful, just not careful enough. The mug I used every morning was still on the same hook, same place, same routine. Something about the way they said it didn't feel new. It felt practiced. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee. The sound of it filling the mug echoed gently in the space. I stood there longer than I needed to, watching the surface settle. The smell of coffee filled the room, but it didn't feel the same anymore. I had done this routine thousands of times, but never with this kind of awareness. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. I had expected something anger, fear, confusion to rise to the surface. Instead, everything stayed contained, held just beneath it, waiting. I carried the cup to the table and sat down. For a brief second, my gaze returned to the living room, the lamp, the carpet, the exact distance between where they had stood and where I had been lying. 10 feet, close enough to hear everything, close enough that they should have known. Or maybe they did. Maybe they simply didn't care. A knock at the front door interrupted the thought. 3 soft taps. Familiar. "Come in," I called. The door opened and Ethan stepped inside, closing it gently behind him. "Morning, Grandma." His voice was easy, unguarded. No hesitation. No calculation. "Morning," I said. He set his bag down and glanced around the kitchen. I was nearby. Thought I'd check in. "I'm glad you did." He gave a small nod, then moved toward the fridge before pausing halfway. "You need anything, I can grab it later." "No, I have everything I need." He accepted that without question. That was something I had always noticed about him. He didn't push into spaces that weren't offered. "Dad mentioned he might come by today," he said after a moment. "Something about paperwork." The words landed softly. Too softly. I lifted the cup to my lips, letting the pause stretch just enough. He did. Ethan leaned back against the counter, watching me more carefully now. "You know what it's about, I have an idea." He held my gaze for a second longer, then nodded. "All right," he said. "Just don't let him rush you into anything." The sentence stayed in the air. Simple, but not careless. I looked at him, then really looked. At the way he stood without tension, at the way his voice didn't shift when he spoke, at the absence of anything hidden behind it. And for the first time that morning, the contrast became unmistakable. "You sound like you've seen that before," I said. He gave a small shrug. "Not with you. But yeah, I've seen him do it." A quiet piece of something settled into place, not a full picture, but enough to change the way the rest of it would be seen. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. He nodded, satisfied, and the conversation moved on. School, a project he was behind on, a professor who graded too strictly, normal things that belonged to a world that hadn't shifted overnight. I listened, answered when it felt right, but part of me stayed somewhere else just beneath the surface, measuring everything with a kind of clarity I hadn't used before. After a while, Ethan checked the time and pushed himself away from the counter. "I've got to go." "All right." He picked up his bag, then paused by the door. "I'll stop by again later this week. I'd like that." He smiled faintly, then stepped outside. The door closed, and just like that, the house settled again. But this time it didn't feel the same. The quiet wasn't neutral anymore. It held something. I sat there for a moment longer, my hands resting around the mug, feeling the last trace of warmth fade. Michael would come back, Angela too. They would bring the same calm voices, the same papers, the same expectation that I would follow along. My gaze shifted toward the living room, the side table, my phone. It was still there, unmoved, waiting. I stood up slowly and walked toward it, stopping just short of reaching out. For a moment I just looked at it. The recording was still there, every word, exactly as it had been said. I could press play. I could hear it all again, but something held me back, something quieter. The understanding that once I listened again, I wouldn't be able to hear it any other way. And this time I needed to listen differently, more carefully, because whatever they had planned, it hadn't started last night, and I was only beginning to see how long I had been standing inside it without realizing. I stood there for a long moment, my hand hovering just short of the phone. The house felt different now. Not louder, not quieter. Just aware, as if everything had settled into place waiting for me to catch up. I reached for the phone, my fingers closed around it. For a second I didn't move. The screen lit up. The recording was still there, unchanged, waiting. I pressed play. Michael's voice filled the room, clear, steady. "The house alone is worth over 600. If we move now, we can split everything before she even notices. Before she even notices." The words landed differently this time, not louder, sharper, not concern, not hesitation. Just timing. Angela followed without pause. "We just need her signature. She won't question it if we say it's for insurance. No doubt. No uncertainty. Just a plan being carried out." I sat down slowly. I didn't look at anything in particular. I just listened, really listened, to every pause, every shift in tone, every moment where neither of them needed to explain anything. They already understood. Michael again. "We'll keep it simple. Insurance update. She won't think twice." A soft shuffle of paper, the tap of a pen, small sounds, but now they felt intentional. "She trusts you," Angela said. Trust, not a feeling, a tool. I leaned back slightly. The chair creaked under me, and something shifted, not in the recording, in me. I had signed something like that before, not because I understood it, because I trusted who handed it to me. A document months ago. A small transfer I didn't question. It had sounded just as simple. I had heard this before, not these exact words, but this tone, that same calm certainty, that same quiet assumption that I would agree before I even knew what I was agreeing to. My mind moved on its own. Michael in the kitchen months ago, a paper sliding toward me, just standard updates, nothing to worry about. Angela at this table. A soft smile. It's easier if everything's in one place. At the time it sounded reasonable, helpful. Now it sounded practiced. I went still, because that was the moment it changed. It wasn't one moment, It was everything I had let pass finally making sense. They weren't asking, they were deciding. The recording continued. "We should do it tomorrow," Michael said. "Morning is better." Of course, clearer then, easier then. Angela agreed, she always did, not because she needed to think, because it had already been thought through. I let the phone rest in my hand. The sound filled the room, and piece by piece things began to connect. Quietly, without effort, like something aligning that had been slightly off for a long time, balances that didn't look right for a moment, then did. Transfers I didn't question, because there was always an explanation. There always is. Michael offering to help manage things after his business started slipping. Angela needing something temporary. Always temporary. Always reasonable. It had never been one moment. It had been many. Small ones. Each one easy to accept. Each one easier than asking a question that might have an answer I didn't want. The recording paused. Just movement. A chair shifting. Paper being straightened. Silence. I didn't rush it. I stayed in it. Because in that silence something settled. Not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly. I hadn't been confused. I had been guided. Gently, consistently. In a direction that always felt like my choice. "They won't even know," Angela said softly. Her voice slipped back into place like nothing had changed. "By the time it's done, it'll already be settled." Michael didn't hesitate. Exactly. That word didn't need to be louder. It was already final. I closed my eyes, just for a second, not to block it out, to let it settle, because this wasn't one conversation. This wasn't one decision. This was something that had been building for a long time, carefully, quietly, and I had been standing inside it, calling it something else, calling it help, calling it trust. I opened my eyes again, looked down at the phone. The red line moved steadily across the screen. Time passing, evidence becoming something more than memory. I didn't stop it. I let it play all the way through. Every word, every pause, every moment where they spoke about me like I was already outside of it. When it ended, the silence felt different. Not empty. Defined. I set the phone down on the table, slowly, deliberately. Because now I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to understand before. This hadn't started last night. And it wasn't going to stop on its own. I sat there, my hands resting flat against the table, feeling the surface beneath them, holding myself steady. Michael would come back, with the same voice, the same papers, the same expectation, and this time, I wouldn't be listening as his mother. I would be listening for what he was really asking for. And this time, I was ready to hear it. He came just before noon. Not early, not late, right on time. I heard the car pull into the driveway, the engine idling for a moment before shutting off. A door opened, closed. Footsteps approached with the same steady rhythm I had heard all my life. Measured, predictable. I didn't move from the table. I had already cleared the space. The coffee cup was gone. The surface was clean, nothing left out of place. If anyone had walked in, it would have looked like any other day. Michael knocked once, then opened the door without waiting. "Mom, I'm in the kitchen." He stepped inside carrying a thin folder in one hand. His expression was neutral, composed. Not tense, not cautious, just prepared. "Hey," he said like nothing had changed. "Hi." He set the folder down on the table between us, his movements smooth, practiced. "I didn't want to take up too much of your day. This should be quick." "Quick." I nodded once. "All right." He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, opening the folder. Papers slid into view, neatly arranged, clipped together. "Nothing complicated," he continued. "Just some updates. Insurance, mostly. It's easier if everything is aligned now instead of waiting." Aligned. I watched his hands as he adjusted the pages. "You've got a lot of things spread out," he added. "Different accounts, different documents. This just keeps it simple." Simple. I didn't interrupt. I let him continue. He pointed to a line on the first page. "This is just confirming access. Makes it easier for me to help you manage things if something comes up." If something comes up. I looked at the paper but not closely enough to read it. Not yet. And this, he said, flipping the page is just making sure everything's consistent across your accounts. No surprises later. No surprises. The words sat there almost careful in how they were chosen. I lifted my eyes to him. When did you start putting this together? Michael didn't hesitate. Recently. I've been thinking about it for a while, though. It just makes sense to get ahead of things. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I asked, get ahead of what? The question was simple. Neutral. Michael leaned back slightly as if giving himself space to explain. Well, he said you know how things can get. Paperwork, legal stuff. It can pile up. This way everything's clear. Organized. Organized. I nodded slowly. And the part where you handle everything I asked, that's just part of staying organized. His expression didn't change. He said it the same way he always did. Calm enough to sound reasonable. He wasn't trying to convince me. He was trying to keep the version of me that wouldn't question him. It's not about handling everything he said. It's about making sure you're not dealing with things alone. Alone. The word landed softly. I'm not alone, I said. No, of course not, he replied quickly. That's exactly the point. You've got me. That's what this is for. I let the silence stretch for a moment. Just long enough. Then I reached for the first page and pulled it slightly closer. This time I read, not quickly, not casually, carefully, line by line. Michael watched me, but he didn't rush. He didn't push. He waited with the kind of patience that looks like respect until you understand what it's really doing. Is something unclear? He asked after a moment. No, I said. It's very clear. I set the page back down. You're asking for full access. It's not full access, he corrected smoothly. It's shared access, just so I can step in if needed. If needed, I repeated. He nodded. And who decides when it's needed? Michael smiled faintly like the question was expected. We do. Together. Together. I held his gaze. Like last night, the words were quiet, but they didn't disappear. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not much. Just enough. I'm not sure what you mean, he said. I didn't look away. You and Angela, I continued. In the living room. The silence that followed wasn't long, but it was different. Measured now. Careful in a way it hadn't been before. Michael exhaled slowly. You were awake. It wasn't a question. No, I said. I was listening. Another pause. Then he leaned forward, slightly resting his arms on the table. Okay, he said. Then you heard us trying to figure out how to make things easier for you. Easier. That's what you call it. It is what it is, he replied. We're looking ahead, making sure everything is taken care of. Taken care of, I repeated. He nodded again. Mom, this isn't a bad thing. You're reading into it more than you need to. I felt something settle inside me then. Not anger, not even disappointment. Just clarity. You said I wouldn't notice, I said. Michael didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back again, adjusting his posture, resetting his tone. That's not what I meant. It's what you said. You're focusing on wording instead of intent, he replied. The intent is to help you. Help. The same word. Used the same way, over and over again, and dividing everything I asked. That's part of helping me too. His jaw tightened slightly. Mom, you're taking this out of context. What context would make that sound different? He didn't answer that. Instead, he shifted back to the papers, tapping the edge of the stack lightly. This isn't about that conversation, he said. This is about what needs to be done now. Needs to be done. I looked at the folder, at the pages, at the space between us. No, I said quietly. It's about both. Michael sighed a controlled release of breath. I think you're overwhelmed, he said. That's all this is. You heard something and now you're connecting it to things that aren't actually related. Overwhelmed. I almost smiled, not because it was amusing, because it was familiar. You think I don't understand what I'm reading, I asked. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying I'm saying? He replied carefully that you don't need to handle all of this on your own. There it was again. The same structure. the same logic. Step in, take over, call it support. I sat back in my chair, letting the distance between us widen just slightly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room was quiet, still, and in that stillness, everything felt settled in a way it hadn't before, not resolved, but understood. Michael reached for the pen and slid it a few inches closer to me. "Just take a look," he said. "We can go through it together." Together. The word hung there, waiting. I looked at the pen, then at him, then back at the papers. I didn't reach for anything. I didn't reach for the pen. I let it sit where he had placed it, resting between us like a decision waiting to be made. Michael watched me for a moment, then drew his hand back slowly, as if he already understood the answer he wasn't getting. "We don't have to do this right now," he said. "You can take your time. Take your time." I nodded once. "I will." He held my gaze a second longer, searching for something, agreement maybe, or doubt. When he didn't find it, he closed the folder, not abruptly, just enough to signal a pause instead of an ending. "Just think about it," he added, standing up. "It's better to have things in place before anything happens." Before anything happens. I didn't respond. He picked up the folder, hesitated for a fraction of a second, then left it on the table instead of taking it with him. "Call me if you have questions," he said. "I will." He walked to the door with the same measured pace he had come in with. No rush, no visible frustration, just control held neatly in place. The door closed behind him, and the house was quiet again. I stayed where I was for a long moment, looking at the folder. Then I reached for it. Not quickly, not reluctantly, carefully. I opened it and began to read. This time there was no conversation to follow, no voice explaining what I should focus on or ignore. Just the paper, the language, and the intent laid out in a way that didn't need to be softened. Access, authority, transfer. The words were precise, neutral on the surface. But they weren't designed for me. They were designed around me. Each page moved the same direction. Each clause closed a door I hadn't realized was open. And each signature line sat quietly at the bottom, waiting for something that would make everything else irreversible. I closed the folder, slowly, then I stood up, walked to the living room, and picked up my phone. For a second I held it without unlocking it. Then I tapped the screen and searched for a number I hadn't needed in years. David Klein. My husband had trusted him. That was enough. The line rang twice before he answered. "David Klein." "David," I said. "This is Louise Bennett." There was a brief pause, then recognition settled into his voice. "Mrs. Bennett, it's been a while." "It has. What can I help you with?" I glanced at the folder still resting on the table. "I need you to look at some documents for me," I said. "Today, if possible." He didn't ask questions. "Come by this afternoon," he said. "I'll make time." "Thank you." I ended the call and stood there for a moment, letting the decision settle. It didn't feel dramatic. It didn't feel urgent. It felt necessary. I picked up the folder and my keys, then made my way out to the car. The drive was quiet. Naperville looked the same as it always did, orderly streets, trimmed lawns, people moving through their day without urgency. The kind of place where things felt stable, predictable, safe. I parked in front of David's office on Jefferson Avenue and sat in the car for a moment before getting out, not hesitating, just marking the shift. Then I stepped inside. The office hadn't changed much. Same reception desk, same muted colors, same quiet atmosphere that made everything feel contained, manageable. Mrs. Bennett, the receptionist, said with a polite smile, "He's expecting you." I nodded and followed her down the hall. David stood when I entered, extending his hand. "Louise, it's good to see you," I said. "And you." We sat across from each other, the folder between us. "What's going on?" he asked. I slid the documents toward him. "I'd like you to explain these to me," I said. He opened the folder and began reading. Unlike Michael, he didn't summarize. He didn't simplify. He read, carefully, page by page. The room stayed quiet except for the soft sound of paper turning. After a few minutes, he leaned back slightly, looking at me over the top of the documents. "Did you sign anything yet?" "No, good. Just one word, but it carried weight. One of them had been there since before the house. I never thought I would have to protect it from my own family. Some of those accounts had been untouched for years, not because I forgot, because I didn't need to. He tapped the first page lightly. These documents would give your son broad access to your accounts, not just to assist control. Control? Not help. Not support. Control. And this section, he continued turning another page, would allow him to make decisions regarding transfers and asset management without requiring additional approval once it's in place. I listened without interrupting. Each explanation didn't surprise me. It confirmed something I already knew. They're structured to look routine, he added. Insurance updates account alignment, but taken together they shift authority. Shift authority from me to him. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought. David closed the folder and rested his hands on top of it. Do you want to proceed with any part of this? No. The answer came without hesitation. All right, he said. Then we don't. Simple. Clear. No pressure, no framing. Just a decision. I sat there for a moment, letting the difference settle. Michael had explained. David had clarified. One asked for trust. The other required understanding. What are my options? I asked. David leaned forward slightly. You can revoke any existing access he has, he said. If there is shared access in place, we can remove it. I nodded. And beyond that, we can restructure your accounts, he continued. Put safeguards in place. Establish a trust if you want more control over how your assets are handled moving forward. A trust. The word stayed with me. Would that prevent something like this? I asked. It would make it significantly harder, he said, and it would ensure that decisions are made according to your instructions, not someone else's. My instructions, not someone else's. I looked down at my hands resting in my lap. For years, I had believed that trust meant letting people in, letting them help, letting them share responsibility. Now I understood something else. Trust without boundaries isn't protection, it's permission. I lifted my gaze back to him. I want to understand everything before I decide anything, I said. David nodded. That's exactly what we'll do. I sat there, the folder still between us, knowing that whatever came next wouldn't be a reaction. It would be a choice. And for the first time since the night before, I wasn't just listening. I was deciding. I didn't rush the decision, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to understand every part of it before I moved. David laid everything out clearly. What access existed, what could be removed, what needed to be changed immediately, and what could wait. First, he said, we confirm exactly what your son already has access to. I nodded. Then we close anything that shouldn't be open. Close. The word felt simple. Final. We started with the basics, account by account. He had me log into everything, checking savings investments. Each screen felt familiar, but the details didn't. Not anymore. David sat across from me, watching quietly as I navigated. Take your time, he said. I did, not because it was difficult, but because I was seeing things differently. Names I hadn't paid attention to before. Authorizations I had assumed were temporary. Settings I had never thought to question. There, David said at one point, leaning slightly forward. That's shared access. I followed his gaze. Michael's name, listed plainly, no explanation needed. That account had been there longer than anything else in the house. I stared at it for a second longer than necessary. Then I clicked. Remove access, David said. I hesitated, just for a moment, not out of doubt, out of recognition, because that one action, simple as it was, meant something had already changed. Then I confirmed it. The screen refreshed. His name was gone. No sound, no notification beyond a quiet confirmation message. But I felt it. A shift. Small, but real. We moved to the next account, and the next. Each one revealed something slightly different. Sometimes access, sometimes linked permissions, sometimes nothing at all. More than enough. By the time we finished, the pattern was clear. It hadn't all been done at once. It had been added slowly, layer by layer, easy to miss, easy to accept, until it wasn't. David leaned back slightly once we were done. That takes care of immediate access. I nodded, my hands resting still on the desk. And the rest I asked. We put structure in place, he said. Something that reflects your intentions clearly, not assumptions. He pulled a new set of documents closer. Trust structure, he said. Control stays with you. Instructions are defined ahead of time. No one steps in without that. No one steps in. I looked at the pages, then back at him. Explain it to me, I said. He did, carefully, without rushing, without simplifying things to the point of losing meaning. A trust that held assets, defined beneficiaries, clear conditions, layers that couldn't be moved without my consent, not implied, not assumed, written. Once it's in place, he said, it becomes the framework everything else follows. Framework, not suggestion, not convenience, structure. I listened to every word, asked questions where I needed to, not many, but enough, because now I knew the difference between understanding something and being told it was simple. When he finished, the room was quiet again. I looked at the documents, then at my hands. For years, I had believed that keeping things open meant keeping things easy, that flexibility meant safety. Now I saw it differently. Open things can be taken. Unclear things can be shaped. Silence can be used. I want it set up, I said. David nodded once. All right. We went through the details, names, allocations, conditions. Nothing rushed. Nothing assumed. Every choice made deliberately. When it was done, he gathered the documents and set them aside. We'll finalize this once everything is prepared, he said, but the important part is already in motion. In motion. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of the afternoon settle into something more defined. Thank you, I said. That's what I'm here for. I left the office with the same calm pace I had entered with, but something was different now. Not on the surface, underneath. The drive back felt quieter. Not empty. Just steady. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly as it had that morning. Unchanged. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and stood there for a moment, listening. The silence was still there, but it didn't feel the same. It didn't feel like something I was inside of anymore. It felt like something I could move through. I walked into the living room. The table was still clear, the chair still slightly angled. The same details, but now they didn't hold anything over me. I moved to the side table and picked up my phone, checked the accounts again. Everything as it should be, no shared access, no silent permissions, just mine. I set the phone back down. Then I looked at the front door. Not because I heard anything, because I knew what would come next. Michael would return, sooner or later, with the same tone, the same confidence, expecting the same outcome, but the structure had changed. The access was gone, and the next conversation wouldn't be the same. I stood there letting that settle, not as a reaction, as control. And for the first time since that night, nothing about it felt uncertain anymore. Angela didn't call. She just showed up. Late afternoon light stretched across the living room when I heard her car door outside quicker, lighter than Michael's. A moment later, the front door opened without a knock. Mom, I'm in the living room. She stepped in, closing the door softly behind her. Her eyes moved quickly, table chair, the empty space where the folder had been. She noticed. Of course she did. Then she smiled. Easy. Practiced. Hey, she said, leaning in to brush a kiss against my cheek. I was in the area. Thought I'd stop by. In the area, I repeated. She laughed lightly. You know what I mean? She sat across from me, smoothing her sleeve. Michael said he came by earlier. Did you get a chance to look at the paperwork I did? And she asked, tilting her head slightly. It's very clear, I said. Good, she replied quickly. Because it really is just about making things easier for you. Easier. She said it like it was a kindness. I'm glad you came, I said. I had a few questions. Of course, she said. Anything. I let a second pass. Last night, her smile held, but it shifted. Just enough. I'm not sure what you mean. You and Michael, I said. In the living room. She met my eyes, then exhaled softly, choosing her approach. Okay, she said. So you heard us? I did. A pause. Then she leaned forward, her voice softening. Mom, I'm really glad you brought this up, she said, because I think what you heard probably sounded worse than it was. Worse than it was. I said nothing. She filled the silence. We were trying to figure out how to handle things in a way that doesn't stress you out, she continued. That's all. There's a lot to manage, and you shouldn't have to carry that by yourself. I'm not carrying it by myself, I said. You are, though, she replied gently, even if you don't realize it. You've always done everything on your own, and that's admirable, but it's also a lot. A lot. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Warm, familiar. We just want to help, she said. I looked at her hand, then back at her. By deciding things before I know about them, her expression tightened, just for a second, then softened again. No, she said. By getting things organized so you don't have to worry about them later. Later, she nodded. You don't want to be dealing with paperwork when something happens. This way it's already taken care of. Something happens, vague, but pointed, and dividing everything I asked. Is that part of getting organized? Her hand stilled. That's not what we meant, she said carefully. It's what you said. You're focusing on one part of the conversation, she replied. Not the intention behind it. The intention. She leaned in slightly. Yes, which is to make sure you're protected. Protected. I almost smiled. You said I wouldn't notice, I said. Her eyes flickered. Once. That's not how I meant it. How did you mean it? That we'd handle the details quietly, she said, so you wouldn't be overwhelmed. Overwhelmed. The same word, the same structure. She squeezed my hand gently. You've always trusted us, she added. This is just an extension of that. I let the silence stretch. Her hand stayed there for a second longer after mine was gone. Then I pulled my hand away, slowly. That was the moment it changed. Not the words, not the tone, the distance. For the first time, it didn't feel like family. Trust isn't something you extend without asking, I said. Her expression shifted again. Not fully, just enough to show the effort behind holding it together. Mom, she said softly, you're making this sound like something it's not. Then tell me what it is. It's family taking care of each other, she replied. It's making sure nothing gets complicated later. It's control, I said. The word landed, flat, clear. She didn't answer right away. She leaned back, resetting posture, tone, expression. You're upset, she said. I understand that, but you're also misunderstanding what we're trying to do. I heard everything I said. A longer pause. This time she didn't rush to fill it. Okay, she said finally. Then let's take a step back. A step back. Maybe we moved too quickly, she continued. Maybe we should have talked to you first. Maybe. But the idea itself isn't wrong, she added. You can't manage everything forever. At some point, someone has to step in. Someone. Not you. Not now. Just someone. And you've decided that should be you, I said. She didn't deny it. She didn't confirm it. She just said, we're the ones who are here. Here. That word carried weight. Because it wasn't entirely untrue. She watched me carefully, waiting. For agreement. For hesitation, for anything she could move forward with. I didn't give her anything. If your own child sat across from you calm, patient, explaining why taking control of your life without asking was help, what would you do? Would you let it go, just to keep the peace, or would you stop it before it went any further? Angela's voice softened again. We don't have to do anything today, she said. We can just talk. Figure out what makes you comfortable. Comfortable? She adjusted again. Tone, posture, approach, still guiding, always guiding, not reacting, guiding. I said nothing, and for the first time she didn't know how to guide it anymore. Not this conversation, not me. And that was when I knew this wasn't over. The door opened again less than 10 minutes later. This time I didn't need to look. Michael didn't call out. He stepped into the living room, taking in the scene in a single glance, Angela in the chair across from me, the space between us, the silence that hadn't quite settled. You came, Angela said, not turning. I was nearby, he replied. The same phrase, the same tone. He moved further into the room, slower this time, more deliberate. His eyes flicked from me to Angela, then back again, reading something in the space between us. Everything okay? He asked. Angela gave a small shrug. We're talking. Talking. Michael nodded once, then pulled a chair slightly closer, not beside her, not across from me, but angled just enough to place himself between positions. Not aligned, not separate. Controlled. What are we talking about? He asked. I didn't answer immediately. Neither did Angela. For a brief moment, the room held that quiet tension, unspoken but clear. Last night, I said. Michael's expression didn't change. Angela exhaled slowly, as if she had already tried that path. I told her we were trying to help, she said. Michael glanced at her briefly, then back at me. That's exactly what we were doing, he said. Not defensive, not apologetic, certain. I looked at both of them, at how easily they settled into the same explanation. No adjustment, no hesitation, just alignment. You said I wouldn't notice, I said. Michael didn't look away. That's not what I meant. It's what you said. You're focusing on one line, he replied. Not the full conversation. The full conversation, I repeated. He nodded. We were discussing options. Planning ahead. That's all. Angela leaned in slightly. We should have explained it better, she added. That's on us. On us. Shared responsibility, balanced. I let the silence stretch. Then I asked, and dividing everything. This time, Michael answered first. That's not what's happening, he said. It's what you said. It's one way to structure things, he replied. Not the only way. One way, not final, just available. Angela picked up the thread immediately. We were just exploring possibilities, she said. Nothing was decided. Nothing was decided, except it had sounded decided. That was the difference. I heard you, I said. Michael leaned back slightly, his posture relaxing just enough to look reasonable. And we hear you now, he replied. So let's take a step back and talk about what you're comfortable with. Comfortable. The same word Angela had used. They didn't need to. They had already agreed, long before this moment. This wasn't a conversation anymore. It was something they had already agreed on before they walked in. They didn't look at each other. They didn't need to. The rhythm was already set. We don't want to push anything, Angela added softly. We just don't want things to get complicated later. Later. Always later. Michael nodded. Exactly. This is about making sure everything is handled properly before it becomes an issue. Handled. Properly. Their words overlapped without colliding. Different tones, same direction. I watched them for a moment, at the way Michael stayed measured, at the way Angela softened every edge, at how easily the two approaches fit together. Not by accident. They had done this before. Not necessarily here, but enough. Enough that it worked. You're asking for access, I said. Michael shook his head slightly. We're asking to help manage things. By having access. By being able to step in if needed. If needed, I repeated. Angela leaned forward again, her voice quieter now. You won't always be able to handle everything yourself, she said. That's not a criticism, it's just reality. Reality. Michael added, and we're the ones who are here, who can take care of things when that happens. When that happens, the phrase hung there, not defined, but understood, and deciding that for me, I asked. Michael didn't hesitate. We're not deciding for you. We're preparing for you. Preparing for you. Angela nodded quickly. Exactly. So you don't have to make difficult decisions later. Difficult decisions. I looked from one to the other, at how quickly they filled space. At how every answer closed around the same idea, control, framed as care, repeated until it sounded reasonable. You've both thought this through, I said. Michael didn't deny it. We've considered it, yes. Angela added, because we care. Care. I almost said something, then stopped, because I could feel it, the shift, not in them, in the room. The pressure was no longer subtle. It wasn't hidden behind suggestion. It was there, steady, consistent, pushing in the same direction. Michael reached for the edge of the table, tapping it lightly with his fingers. "We don't need to overcomplicate this," he said. "We can go through everything together, step by step, step by step." Angela smiled faintly. "At your pace." "Your pace." I let that sit. Then I asked, "And if I say no?" The question didn't raise my voice. It didn't need to. Michael's hand stilled. Angela's smile didn't disappear, but it held, just slightly. "We'd want to understand why," Michael said. "Because we're trying to help," Angela added. "Help. Again. And if I still say no," I asked. A pause. Longer this time. Calculation. Michael leaned forward slightly. "We'd be concerned," he said. Concerned. Angela softened it immediately. "Not upset," she said. "Just worried about you." "Worried?" I nodded once, slowly, because now it was clear, not just what they wanted, but how far they were willing to go to make it sound like something else. The room went quiet again. But it wasn't the same kind of quiet. This one held weight, expectation, pressure, and neither of them moved away from it. They stayed exactly where they were, waiting for me to give them something. Agreement, hesitation, anything. I didn't. I just sat there and let the silence build between us. I didn't answer them. Not right away. I let the silence sit where it was thick, steady, impossible to ignore. Neither of them moved. Neither of them filled it this time. That was new. Michael's hand rested on the table still. Angela's expression stayed soft, but I could see the effort now. The adjustment, the calculation. They were waiting, for me, for a reaction they could work with. I gave them none. Instead, I stood up, not abruptly, just enough to change the shape of the moment. "I'm tired," I said. It wasn't an excuse. It wasn't a strategy. It was simply true. Angela rose halfway from her chair. "Mom, we can finish this, not today," I said. My voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. Michael stood as well, slower, watching me carefully. "We're not trying to pressure you," he said. I met his eyes. I know. That was what made it different. I walked past them toward the hallway. Neither of them followed immediately, but I could feel it, both of them standing there, holding the moment, trying to decide if they should push or step back. In the end, they stepped back. "Call us," Angela said softly behind me. "We can talk when you feel better." "When you feel better?" I didn't answer. I kept walking. The bedroom door closed quietly behind me. And for the first time since the night before, I let myself sit down without holding anything in place. The room was still, dim, familiar. But the weight I had been carrying, the listening, the measuring, the holding back, it shifted. But enough. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands resting in my lap, and let the silence settle around me. Not the silence of waiting, the silence of knowing. They would come back. They would try again, with different words, different timing, the same direction. But now I understood it. Not just what they were doing, how they were doing it. That mattered more, because it meant I didn't have to react. I could choose. I reached for my phone, not quickly, deliberately. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was deciding. I sat there a little longer than I needed to, not because I didn't know what to do, but because I finally understood what they were willing to do, and called David. He answered on the second ring. "Louise, I want to move forward," I said. No explanation, no hesitation. A pause on his end, then, "All right, I want everything in place," I continued. "As soon as possible. We can finalize the trust," he said, "and put immediate protections in place while the rest is processed. Do it." "Okay." No questions, no second guessing, just clarity. I ended the call and sat there for a moment longer. Then I stood up and walked to the desk by the window, pulled open the drawer. Inside were things I hadn't looked at in years. Old documents, bank statements, records I had kept out of habit more than necessity. Now they had purpose. I took them out one by one, set them on the desk, organized them, not rushed, not scattered, carefully, each paper placed where it belonged, each piece part of something larger, something defined. The light outside had started to fade by the time I finished. The room shifted with it, the edges softening, the shadows lengthening. I turned on the lamp, the same warm glow. But it felt different now. Not something I was lying under, something I was standing inside. I gathered the documents and placed them into a single folder, closed it, set it aside. Everything that needed to be in motion was. Everything that needed to be protected would be. I walked back into the living room. The house was quiet again. They had left. At some point while I was in the bedroom. I hadn't heard them go. That didn't matter. I looked at the space where they had been sitting, the chairs, the table, the distance between them, and me. It wasn't the same distance anymore, not physically, but in every other way. I picked up my phone again, opened the recording, didn't press play. Not this time. I didn't need to hear it again. I already knew what it contained, what it proved. I set the phone back down. Then I sat in the chair Michael had used earlier. Let the position settle. Let the perspective shift. Because soon, very soon, this conversation would happen again. But it wouldn't be the same conversation. Not this time. This time I wouldn't be listening. I would be ready. They came back the next morning, together. No hesitation this time. No separate arrivals. The front door opened and I heard both of their voices before they stepped into the living room. "Mom, I'm here." I was already sitting at the table. The folder in front of me, my phone beside it. Nothing hidden, nothing out of place. They slowed when they saw me like that. Michael's eyes went to the folder first. Angela's followed a second later. "Are you feeling better?" she asked. "I am." Michael pulled out a chair and sat. Angela did the same, but her movements were more careful now. "We didn't want to leave things where they were yesterday," he said. It felt unfinished. "Unfinished," I repeated. "We can go through everything again," he added. "At your pace. At your pace." I nodded once, then reached for my phone. "I think we should start with this." I pressed play. Their voices filled the room. Clear. Undeniable. The room didn't move, but something in it shifted. Michael didn't reach for the phone. He didn't speak. He just stayed there watching it, like if he stayed still enough, it might not matter. Angela's hand tightened slightly in her lap. Not enough to draw attention, just enough to show she felt it. No one tried to stop it. No one tried to explain it. The sound filled the space in a way their voices never had before. Clear. Uninterrupted. Without room to soften or redirect. For a moment, it didn't feel like a conversation anymore. It felt like something being placed on the table and left there. "The house alone is worth over 600. Angela's posture stiffened. "Michael didn't move. "We just need her signature. No interruption. No explanation." I had signed things before without reading every line, because I trusted him. "She won't even notice." That line didn't echo. It settled. Heavy. Final. Angela's breath caught just slightly, but enough. Michael's eyes shifted not to me, but to the phone. I let it run a second longer than necessary. Then I stopped it. Set the phone down. No one spoke, because there was nothing left to adjust. "That's what you meant," I said. Michael exhaled slowly. "It sounds worse hearing it like that. It sounds exactly like it is." Angela's voice came softer now without the same control. "We were trying to figure things out," she said. "We didn't think you'd hear it like that." "Like what I asked." She hesitated, then looked away. Michael leaned forward, trying to regain ground. "Mom, this doesn't change what we're trying to do. It changes everything." I opened the folder in front of me. Not his. Mine. "I had the documents reviewed," I said, "by a lawyer." That landed. What Michael said. "I read them carefully," I continued, "and I had them explained properly." Angela's eyes flicked toward him, then back to me, and she asked, "They give you control," I said. "Not help, not support. Control." Michael shook his head. "That's not how it works." "It is," I said. That's exactly how it works. I didn't rush the words. I let them sit where they needed to. I've already removed all shared access from my accounts, I continued. Everything is under my name again. Angela's expression broke this time. Not completely, but enough to see it. You did that without telling us. I didn't need to. Michael's jaw tightened, and going forward I said everything will be structured differently. How, he asked. Through a trust, I said. Defined terms, defined boundaries, silence, real silence, not the kind they could guide, not the kind they could soften. No one makes decisions for me, I said. No one moves anything without my consent. Not now, not later. Angela's voice dropped. You don't trust us. I looked at her, carefully. Not like this. She blinked slowly, like she was trying to find a way back in. There wasn't one. Michael leaned back. For the first time, he didn't look certain. This didn't have to go this way, he said. It did. Because the moment they chose not to ask, there was no version of this that ended differently. Angela looked down at her hands, then back up. We were just trying to help, she said again, but this time it sounded like something she was trying to convince herself of. Then you should have asked, I said. No anger, no accusation, just the line that had been missing from the beginning. The silence that followed was longer, heavier. There was a time when they would have stayed, when leaving like this wouldn't have felt so easy. Michael stood first. Angela followed a second later. No argument, no raised voices, just the quiet understanding that something had closed. Angela paused at the door. Call us, she said. I didn't answer. Michael didn't say anything. The door closed behind them. Every room looked the same, but nothing in it felt the same anymore. And this time the house didn't feel empty. It felt mine again. I stayed at the table for a while after they left. The phone beside me, the folder closed. The light from the window falling across the same surface where everything had started. Only now nothing about it felt uncertain. For a long time, I thought trust meant letting people step in when they offered. I didn't realize it also meant knowing when to say no before they stopped asking. If someone you loved, your own child, sat across from you in your own home and made plans for your life without asking, what would you call that? Tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, take a moment to like it, share it, and subscribe. Because sometimes the hardest thing isn't what people take. It's realizing you still have the chance to keep it. And I'm glad I listened before it was too late.